Good morning, students. So, in the last class, we were discussing about RDBMS SQL JDBC, which is the very last topic before your second assessment. So, in that, we have covered these first four topics. In the last class, we have seen about introduction to RDBMS, Oracle 11J introduction. We have seen select different ways of using the select, and also we have seen how to use the where clause in order to restrict or sort the data. For that purpose, we will be using where clause. So all those uses we have just discussed. So rest of the things we will try to finish today, and we will put full stop to this RDBMS SQL JDBC on the whole. And yesterday, few of them have raised some queries and posted some screenshots regarding the issues that have been encountered during the installation of Oracle 11G. And I clearly said, if any of the files were missing while you are downloading or after you have pasted, if your laptop contain some virus, then some of the files without your knowledge might be destroyed. Apart from that, there's nothing problem. As I have shown you in yesterday's session, you can directly officially download those two zip files and extract them, which you will be getting database 1 and database 2. And I have shown you from database 2, if you get into that deeper inside, you find the folder components, and you just need to copy those four folders in the components of database 2 folder, and again paste them in the components folder of database 1, and then in the database 1 folder you will be finding setup, and just it should install. If it's not getting installed, it's only due to some files got corrupted in your machine due to some viruses. Apart from that, there won't be any issues. So just keep this in mind. So those who are facing issue, I did not responded individually because I have received 11 messages sharing their screenshots saying that this is the error message I'm getting this window in different situations. But just remember the point that nothing you need to do apart from what I have said you yesterday, and only thing you just will be performing is setting of the password. So if anybody is facing issue during the installation, just understand that it's purely that viruses in your system, due to which some of the files might have got corrupted. So just try to once again extract the zips and try to reinstall it. You might be getting it installed. And out of the 11 people who have WhatsApp me the screenshots, among them 9 of them have said that they have successfully installed later, once again after extracting the zip folders, and once again restarting the installation. So that's the only issues you will be facing. Only 2 people have not responded whether they got it back or not. But just remember the fact that it's only due to viruses. If any of the files get corrupted, installation fails. Otherwise, everything will go smoothly. Only password you just need to set it, and rest of the things you can just work it on. And yesterday also I have shown you in the Eclipse IDE for the first JDBC program what I have created. You have seen that how did we add the external jars, and after adding external jars also, if you are getting the class not found exception, as I have shown you, expand the jar, that is the OJDBC jar. Once you expand it and check whether you can see that jdbc.oracle.driver. Oracle driver. So that's the only thing which you need to check for, because if the driver you can see from the jar, then definitely you will be able to execute it without getting any exception raised, that is class not found exception. If you get class not found exception, definitely the jar may not have this particular Oracle driver class. If it is having, then it might have been corrupted. So that's the problems you will be facing with the database connections. So just remember all these points, and we shall move on to today's session. So yesterday we have discussed up to this restricting and sorting data. So now we will cover the remaining topics. So very quickly, because most of you might have already known these DDML and DML commands. Very quickly, I'll just move ahead so that I'll move with the types of JDBC drivers. And today's agenda is we'll just quickly discuss the four types of drivers. Even though I said as per industry standards, we are going to use only the type 4 driver, which is the thin driver. So we'll just quickly navigate through the different types of drivers, and then we will discuss the metadata characteristics. What is metadata? I already said you yesterday. It's nothing but data about data. That's what the definition of metadata is all about. So you just need to understand, you will be getting lots of information with regard to the data as well as the database. So whatever the relations that you have been creating into the database, you can just extract all kind of informations with regard to the relations that you are being creating. So that's what you will be able to achieve with the metadata characteristics. So that's what we are going to just examine once, and then one last thing which I am going to skip it in this particular thing is the very last concept. Here you can see using callable statement and transactions. It's only for your knowledge purpose, but as part of the training this is not required for us, because you are not going to deal with any kind of transactions at the end of the project also. So when you are dealing with projects, then you require these transactions, and callable statement you require only when you are dealing with the procedures in database. So those who have studied DBMS subject, they might be understanding when I am saying procedures. So you can create procedures in databases. So when you are dealing with procedures in databases, then you require this callable statement. So this callable statement is required in order to execute a method called prepare call, and then you are going to invoke the procedures from the databases, and that procedures will contain the code that is going to be performing some operations over the database. So only for invoking the procedures we use this callable statement. Apart from that, we don't require this callable statement at all. And as I said, we are not going to discuss any of the database procedures in this training. That's the reason I'm going to skip this particular last topic, as no procedures are going to be explained by me. And similarly transactions also, we are not going to deal with any of the transactions. So if you are going to deal with the transactions, then you will just require those two commands, that is commit rollback and grant. So those you just require. Anyway, as I mentioned, these two I'm not going to discuss. So if you require, you can just use this PDF for your understanding, and you can just create a procedure of your own in the database, and then once you create the procedure, then you can use the code which is there in this PDF, and you can experiment it on your own. So that's the only thing I'm skipping it. Now coming to the manipulating data, it's nothing but the DML operations. So here these are the things which you are going to perform as part of the DML. So inserting rows, updating rows, deleting rows, and controlling the transactions. So these are all the things which we are going to see. And so I have already shown you how to insert records. So I think it will be too childish if I just discuss all these things, because I expect most of you already know these syntaxes. Except EC people, they might have not explored this database management system subject as part of their academics. Only those people might be facing the difficulty with using of these queries. CSC students are familiar with all these particular queries. They know how to insert rows into the table, updating rows into the table, deleting rows from the table. Anyway, very quick. So this is the syntax: insert into table name, values, and then you are going to specify the values, and anything in square brackets, those are the optional. Here you can see values mandatorily you need to insert. Once you specify insert into table name values mandatorily, and specifying the column names particularly is optional. By default, when you want to insert entire record for all the columns, then you don't require this columns field after the table. Directly you will use insert into table name values, and in the brackets whatever the number of columns you have for that particular table, that many values you are going to insert in the same order. Order is mandatory. Whatever the columns order you have created at the time of table creation, you need to use the same order while inserting values into the table also. So here one example is given. Anyway, this I have already shown you while I have created the student table. So insert into table name, and then if you want to specify, you can specify the column names. Otherwise, directly you can use values, and then you can give the values in the order. So here you can see this is the implicit method. So omitting the columns from the column list. So here you can see only one particular column name is mentioned, and that particular value is only being inserted. And if you want to insert null value, that is also permitted. Like this you can use, unless while table creation no constraint like not null used. If while creating table, if not null constraint was used, then you cannot insert a null value to that particular field. Just remember that point. And in the Java language, generally we will be, rather than directly doing this, this is how you will be doing with the SQL plus. In the SQL plus directly, this is how you will be doing, but in reality we will be dealing only with the front end Java application. So in that case, what we will be doing is we will be using the question marks, so that those values can be read by the user, and then later they can be set into the database. So that is how we will be doing. I hope you remember my previous session where I have created the table and shown you. So I have used prepare statement, and then I have passed the query insert into student values, and then two question marks I have placed, where that first question mark represents the roll number and second question mark represents the student name, which later we have set it using the prepared statement object and prepared statement object methods. We have used for first column we have used setInt method, for second column we have used setString method, and then two parameters we have specified. The first parameter containing the column position, second parameter containing the value to that particular column. So that's what we will be using the Java's front end application in order to insert records into. So here you can see ampersand is represented. So in the yesterday's session also we have seen, whenever there is an ampersand, prompt will be given allowing user to specify its value. The same thing what we have done is, in front end Java application we have represented the question mark. Rather than passing value directly, we are representing question mark, and later we are just setting its value by the prepared statement object dot setInt or setString approximate method we use in order to insert the record. So if you use ampersand, you can read the values from the user. And here you can see this is a first you are just using select query, and the output of this select query is being passed as input to the insert into values. So this is for the update query. The syntax is update table name set keyword the column name with value and where clause at particular point. I mean the condition you are going to specify, because you are not updating everywhere now. If you want to update everywhere, ignore where clause. That's the only thing. If you ignore where clause, everywhere it will be updated. If you use where clause, whatever the condition that matches, only that particular place the set value will be set. So that's the only difference. Here you can see the first one, update inventories table set warehouse ID value to 7, where product ID matches with 3108 only. That means only those product IDs with 3108 rows only will be updated with the warehouse ID value as 7. If you ignore this where clause, then all the records warehouse id value will be set to 7. That's the only difference. Anyway, for our project assessment purpose, you don't require any of these queries. And this is for deleting. So delete from table where condition. So if you use this, you can remove records, I mean the entire rows where that particular condition matches. And if you don't use, then all the rows gets deleted, but still the table structure exists. Only thing is, but no records will be available for retrieving. So that's the only difference. Here you can see, when the condition is given using the where clause, only that particular records gets deleted. When no condition is given using where clause, then all the rows gets deleted. That's the only difference you just need to remember with regard to delete. So this is another way of representing. So here, rather than giving the condition directly, you are retrieving the condition using a select query. So whatever the output of select query will be there, that will be the condition for deleting the records. So truncate will destroy the structure as well. That's the only difference, because while you're using delete, what you are doing is you are just okay. Truncate will delete only the records, rather than structure is still intact. So you just require drop command for destroying the structure also. So commit or rollback. Commit means whatever the queries you have executed until that time, everything will be permanently saved. Rollback means things, everything will be rolled back to the earliest commit. So save point also I have said you. So whenever you are creating a save point, so the next rollback will be made up to that save point only, not up to the starting of your transactions or the queries. So I hope you can understand from this. Delete from copy employee. That means all the records will be deleted from the employee copy employee table. And if you execute this rollback immediately, again you can get everything restored. You can get everything restored. That means all the records again they will be there in that copy employee table. So any quiz questions? Let's see. The following statement produce the same results. So delete from table name, truncate table name. So the answer will be true, because both of them will be keeping the structure, only the records gets deleted, because in the delete clause you can see where is not used, I mean condition is not specified. Similarly truncate, by default, by nature, truncate will not use any where clause. So both will produce the same results. Answer is true for that. So okay, let's move to DDL quickly and then move to the JDBC concepts. So with the DDL command, what we are going to learn is creating a simple table, explaining how constraints are created at the time of table creation. That means setting not null, key settings, that is which particular column should be the primary key, all that we are going to see here. So these are the terms you just need to remember, and I already mentioned we are going to use only the tables, not even the views we will be using. But definition wise you can just note down this. So table is the basic unit of storage which will be composed of rows, whereas view logically represents subset of data from one or more tables. So you will be extracting from more than one table. That's what you will be saying view. And sequence generates numeric values. And this is what I'm going to show you, because this we require. Sequence we require to understand, because whatever might be the project you will be getting for the end assessment, you require to create sequence and then get the sequence value. This I will show you in today's session. And anyway, index and synonyms we are not going to use. Even views we will not be using. Only tables and sequences we require to understand. And this also I think I have said you. So table names and column names, day before yesterday's session itself I have said you this particular point. It must and should begin with the English letter, and it should not exceed 30 characters. I do remember I have mentioned this point. So whatever the table name and column name you are choosing, just make sure that it starts with English letter, and it should not be 30 characters, more than 30 characters. And obviously these things you can understand. It should not be an reserved keyword. It should not be reserved keywords. And no duplicates will be allowed. That's what we understood with the differences between the file management system and the database management system. In the day before yesterday's session, when we have seen the differences between file management system and database management system, we have seen that point also, because file management system has a disadvantage of redundancy, whereas database management system avoids that redundancy, because whenever you have a table existing already, if you try to create another table with the same name, definitely it will not permit you. So that's what redundancy is avoided. So here you can see this is the syntax. You already know this: create table, table name, and then inside the parenthesis mandatorily you will be specifying column and the data type, and then constraints also you can specify beside that. So if it is with related to multiple users, this is what you will be doing. So select star from user b.employees, because user A is trying to access user B's records now. Then select star from user b.employees. If it is of user A, directly he can access anyway. And this is only permitted if user B gives permission to user A to access. This is permitted only if user B gives permission to user A to access. Then only this can be possible. Anyway, as part of the training, I am not going to show you any creation of multiple accounts and all that. So this is one of the example: create table, hire dates, ID, number of 8. And here the point need to be remembered is, you can, if at all you want decimal values, then you have to use 8 comma 2, something like that, 8 comma 4, something like that. So that's what the same number type you will be using in order to specify for integers or float values also. So here we have only single type, and we call it as number type. And right now what was given is only the precision value. When you want to go for decimal values, the format is number of p comma s. Just remember this: number of p comma s, where p represents the precision and s represents the scale value. P represents precision and s represents the scale value. So one thing you just need to remember is, precision cannot exceed 38 digits. Precision cannot exceed 38 digits. Just we need to remember that point. So like if I say 1234.56, I mean if I want a value like 1234.56, then the type which you have to use is number of 6 comma 2, because when I am saying 1234.56, altogether how many digits? 1234 before the decimal point and 56 after the decimal point. That means altogether 6 digits. So you have to use number of 6 comma 2, where 2 represents the number of digits after the decimal point. Number of digits after the decimal point. So that's how you will be representing. So number type is used for representing integers as well as the real values. For real values, you have to use p comma s format, where p is the precision which cannot exceed 38 digits, s is the scaling factor. and whatever the scaling factor you are going to mention, that also should be within the range of -84 to 127. This is as defined by the Oracle. This is as defined by the Oracle standard document. So it should not exceed -84 to 127 value. So this is the point you just need to remember. Next, this is another way of create table, the table name, ID, number of 3. So when we say number of 3, you just need to understand that it will not exceed 3 digits. ID will not be exceeding 3 digits. You can just try and see what happens when you try to insert 4-digit number. I'm just giving you as a task. You can just try and see what happens if you try to insert more than 3 digits. Similarly, quantity number of 3, order date, default sys date. So this is the constraint. This is what you need to understand. So you can even set the constraints at the time of table creation or later also. You can even specify these constraints later also, but in general, it's a good practice that you know for what purpose you are creating a table. Accordingly, you set all the constraints initially itself. So order date, we are not going to specify. By default, it will take the system date. That's what the point need to be understood here. So here you can see describe. So we are not going to use describe. We will just use DESC. If you just use DESC, that's sufficient. Space table name will give you this table like indicating you the description about the table, all the column names, and then if any null constraints are there, and then the types of each and every column. So this is what the description you will be getting. I think in last class I have shown you this particular description. So you can just use the command DESC space table name, which provides you information in a table containing names, types of each and every column, and if any of the null constraints are there, then you will be getting that. And these are all the data types. So we will be using for strings varchar2. So earlier we used to use only varchar, but later on varchar is not being used. We are using varchar2 only, because one reason is it will be storing only up to the length of characters given. Even though you are specifying varchar2 of 100, and if there are values of varied length, then depending on the length only the storage will be there. This is one reason. Another reason to go for varchar2 is it can store up to 4000 characters. It can store up to 4000 characters. This is also another reason why we are using varchar2. First reason is, rather than a fixed length of memory storage, it just consumes based on the string length that you are going to store into that particular value. And second reason, it can store up to 4000 characters. So these are the two reasons why we are going for varchar2. And another thing what you need to remember is varchar can distinguish an empty string and a null. I mean capital letters NULL. Whereas varchar2 will not do. So this point also need to be remembered. I don't know whether it will be asked for assessment or not, but this is the point you just need to remember with regard to varchar2. First thing, memory consumption effectiveness will be there. Second reason, can store up to 4000 characters. And third reason, sorry, it's not reason, one limitation is it cannot differentiate the empty string and the null. It cannot differentiate the empty string and the null, whereas varchar can do that. Varchar can do the differentiation of empty string and null. And similarly char, here as you can see, fixed length character data. So this is what I was saying, number of p comma s. P represents precision, s represents scale, and date. So this also I have said you in the yesterday's session. So date also will be in dd, mon, yy format. And long character data, raw and long raw, binary data, binary file. So all these here you can see the descriptions, and these are the date time data types. So these are the constraints that you can use at the time of table creation. As you can see here, the following constraint types are valid at the time of table creation: not null, unique, primary key, foreign key, check constraint. So that means if you are using this not null for a column, I mean, if I am saying create table student within the brackets id number of 3 space not null, automatically you must understand that you cannot leave it empty. Id field you cannot give null or you cannot leave it empty. That's what the point need to be noted. Similarly, if I give unique there, no duplicates are allowed. No duplicates are allowed. And you can combine all these constraints also. It's not that only one single constraint only you can use it for one particular column. You can combine these constraints. There's nothing wrong. You can say id number of 3 not null unique primary key. Like this you can combine all the constraints also. So you are just saying that id, which is nothing but the roll number, cannot be null and it should be unique, and also it is the primary key through which I am going to identify the students. I hope you are understanding. So you can combine these constraints also. It's nothing like only one single constraint for one single column can only be used. And these are the constraints you can use. And foreign key also we have seen in yesterday's session. So when you have another table which is referring to this particular primary key attribute, that becomes the foreign key there. So you can, this is what you can see here at the same time as the creation of the table, after the creation of the table. So creating a constraint can be done at the time of table creation or after the table creation. You can do it either ways. But as I mentioned, generally whenever you are dealing with databases, you must be having the knowledge of for what purpose you are doing this. And I also mentioned in yesterday's session that there will be architects who will be doing the design of database, and that design will be done in ER diagram representation, which will be given to the developing team, and the team will be using that. And yesterday's session we have seen one of the ER diagram where we have seen the class names, I mean the entity names in capital letters, and then the attribute names we have seen in small letters, and the primary key attributes we have seen them in different color. I hope you remember. So that is the reason, as I mentioned, you can do it at the time of table creation or after the creation, but in general we start development only after the architect gives us the design. So in the design itself it will be mentioned everything completely, what are the attributes and what are the types and what are the constraints, everything will be mentioned in the design itself. So by seeing the design, immediately you will be understanding at the time of table creation only what are the constraints we have to impose with regard to each and every relation. So here this is what I mentioned: create table, table name, and then column, data type, and then that particular column constraints. You can have multiple constraints also, as I mentioned. So here you can see the first one example is for setting a particular column as primary key. So create table orders, order id. So order id cannot exceed 4 digits, and the constraint that is being imposed is primary key. And this middle one, ord underscore ord underscore id underscore pk, is just the constraint name. It's just the constraint name. Constraint name, and that particular constraint. So that's what how you are doing. And similarly here you can see, as I mentioned, in the second case you can see customer id varchar 2 of 10 not null, and then constraint is primary key, which is the primary key order id. So column wise you can set the constraint, table wise you can set the constraint. So this is how you can do. After defining all the columns also, you can start using these constraints. So that's what here at the column itself the constraint was specified, Here, after inserting all the columns, then the constraint was specified. But when you are doing that, compulsory you need to use this brackets and mention this particular constraint is for which particular column. This point need to be remembered. But when you are doing at the column level, you don't need to mention again any brackets, because you are directly doing at the column itself. So when you are doing at the column level, you don't require any brackets to be mentioned. But here you can see compulsory you need to mention the parenthesis, because it will not be understood this particular constraint ORD underscore ORD underscore ID underscore PK primary key is for which particular column. So that's the reason compulsory it need to be mentioned in parenthesis like this. And not null constraint, you can see none of the values can be blank or null. You can see here absence of not null constraint, you can have null values. In the last two columns you can see. And having unique constraint imposed, no name can be repeated. So here in this particular employees table, as you can see, email field is set as unique constraint, so you can never duplicate it. So here you can see, if this is the table and if JSmith is inserted into the record with email JSmith, and next time, even though the employee ID which is primary key is different, but still you cannot have this same mail ID being used for new record. So this is a clear picture about how you can use the constraints. So create table orders, order ID, order mode, which cannot be null, order status, customer ID, and order date. Date also cannot be null. So something like this. And this is the table level constraint, because it's not used at the column level. This is the table level constraint where we are specifying after specifying all the columns. So constraint order ID underscore UK. So this is just the constraint name. You will not be generally using this at any place during your application creation. You will not be using this constraint name, so it's just the constraint name. You can give any name. So the foreign key how you will be using, you can see here. So this is from different table we are just referring to, so that's how you will be using. So constraint order ID, order inventories, foreign key column is order ID, and this order ID is referencing from inventories. This is how you will be invoking the foreign key constraint. So when you will be having two tables where one of the column is referring with the primary key of another table, then you will be imposing this foreign key constraint, and this is how you will be using. So here you can see there is a inventories table, and inventories table is containing order ID column, and that order ID column is a primary key in inventories table. So in the orders table, what you are saying is whatever the order ID is there in this orders table, it should be matching with the order ID value of the inventories tables order ID. So for that reason we are using this, whatever you can see in this blue box. So constraint order inventory foreign key order ID references inventories order ID, and this is the table level constraint which is specified later. Okay, I think let's move to the remaining things. So alter command. So by using alter, what you can do is you can rename a column, you can drop a column, you can add a new column, you can modify the type of the column, you can set the default value for a column. Everything you can do using the alter command. So all these things you can just do it with the alter command. Here you can see alter table orders read only. alter table orders, read write. So like this. So this is what you will be doing by using constraints. So you will enforce rules so that while inserting anything or while updating anything or while deleting anything from the table which you created, you are enforcing the rules. So these are all the things you can just do by restricting. Okay, very quickly. So this already I have discussed about the introduction to JDBC. Very quickly we will see, and as I said, we will see the types of JDBC drivers, and then we will understand why we are using only type 4 driver, which I already mentioned that at the time of creating the sample JDBC application I said you that we will be using only type 4 driver as per the industry standards. Now I said you, so we'll just quickly have an understanding about why we are using only type 4 driver. So what are the limitations that we have with the remaining 3 type drivers? So that's what we'll just understand. So basically JDBC is nothing but a API. JDBC abbreviation anyway you all know that JDBC stands for Java Database Connectivity. And what is this JDBC is? JDBC is an API that will be used for establishing the connection between the front-end Java application and the back-end database. That database can be anything. And this particular JDBC API is part of the java.sql package because it contains all the interfaces that specifies this JDBC API. And what you are going to do with this JDBC is you can connect to one or more data servers, you can execute and process the SQL statements, and you can obtain the result set, and then you can navigate through the results. Similarly, you can even get the metadata. Regarding metadata, I'll show you from the JDBC program what I have created. From that only I'll just show you how to use the metadata, everything. And this is what the architecture, and here you can see the 4-step process. So this 4-step only I have said you in 5 steps. So basically connect I have said you in 2 connect itself I have divided in 2 more, that is loading the driver and then connecting I said. So here connect itself is comprising of loading and creating connection. So that's the reason here you can see 4-step process only. So connect, querying, processing results and closing. Yeah, here you can see the division anyway. So connect again further divided into 2 steps, registering the driver, connecting to the database. So the same thing which I have said you in 5 steps. So first you will register the driver and then you will connect to the database using the driver manager.get connection which we have used in our case, and then we are going to create statement or prepared statement in order to execute queries, and then we will process the results using execute query or execute update. So execute update method we will use it for various kinds of queries, whereas execute query method exclusively we use it for select queries. And then finally you will close the connections and statements that you created, and just make sure that once you close the statement then you cannot execute any of the queries. If you want to execute queries after closing the statement, once again you need to prepare a new statement. Similarly, after closing the connection you cannot perform any operations with the database. For that again you need to initiate new connection. So here you can see the driver acts as the interface between the front-end Java application and the back-end database. That's what basically this driver will be useful for. So it's an API. Driver is nothing but the API which acts as interface between the front-end Java application and the back-end database. And here you can see what JDBC can connect with. It can connect with Oracle, DB2 of IBM, Sybase, Microsoft's SQL Server, MySQL. All these are the varied databases that this JDBC can connect with. And here comes the types of drivers. So the first type driver we call it as JDBC ODBC bridge driver, and this particular bridge you need to externally download and install, and this particular ODBC driver is not implemented in the pure Java form. It can be in any other language, and this ODBC bridge driver is from the original Sun Microsystems, which is now being owned by Oracle Corporation. So this ODBC bridge, as I said, you require external installation and you require some additional setup. I mean, manually you need to set up certain environment variables. You need to create the interfaces, and then another thing, as I mentioned, for each and every type of database, you will be having a separate ODBC bridge driver. You will be having a separate ODBC bridge driver. So it's not of common kind. With respect to different databases, different ODBC bridges are available. So if your database changes, then the bridge also has to be downloaded, and then a separate interface need to be created manually, and then connection, whatever this particular reference name you are going to use for this particular ODBC interface that you created manually, need to be added into your application code also. Understand the things what you need to do for using this particular type 1 driver. So that's the reason nowadays we are not using this particular ODBC bridge, and those accountants kind of people who have the front end application which is being designed by some company, and their application will be requiring only MS access, then what they can do is, if always they are going to use only MS access, by default with Windows they will be getting this ODBC bridge of MS access, so directly they can have their front end application connected to the MS access database. So those who are not going to change their databases, and they can just set up this for once by downloading the corresponding bridge and then creating an interface and then adding that particular reference to the front end application. Those who are not going to change their database forever or for over a long period of time, they can use this particular thing. And point need to be noted is, as I said, the bridge is not implemented using pure Java, so it can be of non-Java code also. That's the reason the performance also will not be that effective. And we, being the developers, will be working for a company and we'll be having varied clients. I mean, different types of clients, and each and every client will be having their own requirement of database challenges. So for that reason, bridge drivers will not be using in the real-time application developments. That's the reason nowadays nobody is using this JDBC ODBC bridge driver. And second one is the partial Java driver. This is the other name that will also be used, even though it's not mentioned here. So this is the type 2 driver, which is said to be native JDBC driver. We also call it as partial driver. And this particular thing, as you can see here, each and every vendor specific libraries are being provided. That particular libraries will be designed in C or C++, and these vendor specific drivers need to be installed. These vendor specific drivers need to be installed, and this uses the native code library. When we say native code library, understand that it's not the pure Java code. The traditional coding languages, whatever might be there, that might be being used. And for this vendor specific libraries, you require the communication. As you can see, whatever your client machine is there, it should be communicating with the vendor database library, which in turn communicates to the actual database server. From the diagram you can understand. So your front-end application will be communicating to the vendor-specific database library, which in turn communicates to the actual database server. So that's what you can see from the diagram also. And as I said, where you will be using this particular thing is like it's better than the type 1 driver, that is than compared to the ODBC bridge driver. This is far better, but still you need to understand the fact that again you need to communicate to the libraries, which in turn communicates to the server. Again server communicates back to the vendor library only. This library will in turn communicate to the application. So the vendor will be providing the libraries that are responsible for reading your application and translating it to the corresponding database language, and then getting the result from the database in database language, and then retranslating it to the your application understandable way. So this is all it will be doing. And next, the type 3 drivers are the pure Java drivers. I said for type 2 partial Java drivers na, so that's the reason type 3 driver I am saying full Java drivers. So here we will be using the middleware, as you can see from the diagram. In the diagram also you can see net protocol pure Java driver. The client machine will contain this net protocol pure Java driver, and this particular pure Java driver communicates to the middleware server, and this middleware server in turn communicates to the database server. The point need to be noted is here you can just perform it on the fly. You can just perform it on the fly. That means you don't require any installation of the database libraries installed in your machine. You don't require any external loading or installation of this database libraries into your client machine. That's what you can see from the diagram also. So earlier you have seen that client machine have also been installed or loaded with the database libraries, and each and every database vendor will provide those libraries, which you need to download it and load it into your client machine, which will be responsible for communicating with the database server. But here you can see the third party middleware will be there, which will be responsible for making this communication to happen. Only you just require is the particular database driver to be installed in your machine. That's it. You don't require any additional libraries need to be loaded here. And as you can see from the diagram, you can just have this net protocol pure Java driver in your machine installed, which will communicate with the middleware server, which in turn communicates to the actual database server. And the advantage is you can just have them go on the fly. So you can just go to the client environment without any carrier, and then directly you can have this particular application deployed on the fly. You can just have this connection established. So it's 100% Java driver. You can see no native methods are required. Only thing is middleware server will be performing this transmission. Middleware server is performing these transmissions. That's what the thing. And coming to the type 4 driver, which we also call it as the thin driver. So, and the reason why we are using, you can see from the diagram itself. From the diagram itself, you can understand why we are using this type 4 driver. So you can see native protocol pure Java driver directly communicating to the database server. So no middleware, no need to have any of the database libraries in my client machine, and no need of any ODBC bridges. So in type 1 you have seen ODBC bridges which are not implemented in Java. They are implemented in some native code. Whereas with the type 2, as you have seen, client machine need to have this particular database libraries, and if you change the database, again you need to change your database libraries, all that you require. And coming to type 3, as you have seen, there is a middleware which you have to trust upon, that it will not leak any of the security constraints. You just need to believe it upon on the middleware server. But coming to type 4 driver, you can see no intermediate middleware. So you can have direct communication. So how this is possible is, I don't want to get into the details, but just remember the fact that type 4 drivers communicates with sockets directly. Type 4 drivers communicates with sockets directly. So that is the reason how this direct communication is possible with type 4 drivers. So direct communication will be there because of the use of sockets, socket programming. So I'm not going to get into the socket programming, what it is, everything. So just remember that socket programming is about end-to-end communication. So you can have end-to-end direct communication. So it's possible because of the communication with the sockets directly. So that's why we are using type 4 drivers, since no middleware, no need external database libraries need to be loaded in my machine. That's the reason we are using this type 4 drivers. And this is also 100% pure Java drivers. And the industry name what we will be using for this is thin driver. Thin driver, because no additional libraries, no middleware support. That's the reason, since the particular driver API code is very shorter, we just call it by the name thin driver. And this is why we are using type 4 drivers. And the quiz questions anyway, it's given there itself the answers. Type 1 driver is also known as JDBC ODBC bridge driver, and all the classes and interfaces used in JDBC programs are found in which package? Java.sql package. The answers are given anyway there itself. Next, establishing connection, anyway I think I have said you. So this everything I have said you while creating the program itself. So you will be using JDBC colon subprotocol. In our case we are using Oracle, so JDBC colon Oracle, and then subname, which will be the database identifier, where you will be using the driver name colon @ database. That means for connecting to database what you require, the port number and then the URL and password. So the same thing here also. So driver we are using thin driver. I think somewhere it should be here. Yeah, here you can see. So JDBC and then the database, which is the Oracle, and then the driver, which is the thin, and then @ database is nothing but the port number and everything. So @ location where you are connecting your database to. So if it is in your local machine, you can use @ localhost, or else if it is installed somewhere else, that particular database which you are referring to is somewhere else, then you have to specify that particular IP address. So in our college case, if I take the example, we will be using the college server IP address, because in all the machines of our college we have only the Oracle client installed, but the actual server is in the server room. That's the reason we will be using IP address in our college. I mean, CSC people might be understanding when I am saying this, because you will be having only the client edition installed. The server is installed in the server room. That's the reason you will be using at the time IP address. So even for our local machine also, you can use the IP address, which you can get it by using ipconfig command. In your command prompt you can get your IP address. You can even specify @ IP address also, but still by use of @ localhost, it makes me simple to understand that I am running on my local machine, and then the port number and then the service name. So this is what you can see. You can either use like this @ localhost, or you can use it with the IP address. So it's up to you. And this I have already shown you how to find the service name and the port number of the database service. I hope you remember. Yeah, you will be, and this is what the same location for me also. That's the reason even I have installed and set up in E drive. So E drive you will be, if you have chosen at the time of installation E drive, app folder, and then the username, and then the product, and then the version, and then the database home, and then the network folder, and then the admin folder. In that you will be finding the file name tnsnames.ora, something like this, tnsnames.ora file. In that you can see the service name and port number, as you can see here. I have already shown this service name and port number. This is how you can find it, so that you can use it in the connection. Yeah, here you can see port number, service name. and these all things you already know. So how you will be loading, and here example is given, and this is for the type 4 driver, and this is for the ODBC bridge driver, sun.jdbc.odbc.jdbc driver. Now we are not using this, and this is for the ODBC bridge. And getting connection, we already have seen this also, driver manager dot get connection. Yeah, so register the JDBC driver. Answer is given there itself. Option B, class dot for name oracle dot JDBC dot driver dot oracle driver. And for second one, how do you create connection? Option D, driver manager dot get connection of URL, username, password. So it's not like create connection. Okay. Okay. Coming to metadata, this I want to show it with execution. So what is metadata? As I said you, metadata is all about data about data. Metadata is nothing but data about data, and this I also mentioned in yesterday's session also. So you are going to find or get information about the data that you have stored in the database. You are going to get information about the data that you have stored in your database. So for that we will be using this metadata, and for this we have classes like database metadata. We have database metadata, which you can just get the object of database metadata by invoking the get metadata method over the connection object which you created, and then you can get various informations by using this particular database metadata object. So let's see it practically. So here is our code. This is the same program which I have shown you in day before yesterday's class, the same program. So what you can do is just make sure that before closing the connections only you will be using all these things. And here you can just use database metadata. You can just give any name. So let me use a D equal to, and as I mentioned, how do you get this particular database metadata object? You can just get it by invoking the method. Here you can see the very first method, because since I have used my connection object, and when I am pressing dot, automatically it is giving me, my ID is giving me which method I can use over my connection object, and the first one which you can see is the get metadata. Actually the methods it will be displaying you is in alphabetical order, but still you can see get metadata is the very first method my IDE is showing. The reason is the left hand side I am using the database metadata reference. Since left hand side I am using database metadata reference, automatically when I am writing connection object dot, despite of giving me alphabetically, directly the first one itself it is showing me the get metadata method, so that it matches with the left hand side reference variable. So just use that semicolon, and then what you can do is you can just press enter and sys out control space, and then you can just use this D dot. So here you can see what are the various methods that you can use on this particular database metadata. So you can check, are all procedures callable, something like this. All procedures are callable. So boolean represents it is going to say true or false. If all the procedures are callable from this particular database, then it will give true, otherwise it will give false. Next, all tables are selectable. If all tables are selectable, it will return me true, else it will return me false. Next, if auto commit failure closes all result sets, it will return me true, else it will return false, something like that. Deletes are detected, something like this. You can specify the type for which one you are asking for, and similarly equals in order to check for two different objects. So you can see these are all the various methods that you can use in order to get the metadata information about the database. In order to get the metadata information about the database, so all procedures are callable. Let's just run this and see. And similarly, let's also use one more. All tables are selectable. Okay, let's just see. But just understand, by using this connection objects get metadata method, it returns the database metadata object through which you can just get the metadata information about the database. So let's just save this, and I think a few things need to be modified because create table will not work because we already created table yesterday. So let's keep that in comments. So inserting record, it will not affect because multiple times it gets affected inserted. Apart from that, nothing happens. The same records get inserted multiple times. Let's not worry about that. So here you can see insertion success, and since already one record is inserted when we have executed this program earlier, so once again record got inserted and it is returning 2 times false. So all procedures are callable because I haven't created any procedures into this particular account. I did not create any procedures, and all tables are selectable. Again it is returning false because not all tables are selectable for this particular account. So like this you can just get this information. Similarly, you can even use result set metadata. So this is also very important. So result set metadata can also be used, and this you have to use with the result set object. So my result set object is rs, so rs dot, and then you require the method get metadata. Yeah, here you can see get metadata. So the return type also you can see result set metadata. So now you must be understanding why on the left hand side I have taken the result set metadata. Okay, that's the reason it did not give me. I have written result metadata. That's the reason it did not give me starting result set metadata. So now the red highlighter gone. So a semicolon missing. So result set object invoking the get metadata method will return me the object of result set metadata. And what all you can do with this result set metadata object? So you can get the column name, you can get the column type, you can get the column type name. Like that you can get various things with this result set metadata. So let me show you what are the things you can just acquire from this. So let me use a for loop because I'll be having more columns. Even though in this I know that I have only 2 columns, but still general way of using result set metadata is and I hope you can understand why I am starting from 1 and not from 0, because with respect to table the first column starts with index 1 only, not from 0. That's the reason I am using that. Result set metadata object dot. Here you can see the first reference always it gives you the appropriate one based on the location where you are using, based on the object with what you are using. That's what the advantage of using IDE. So here you can see the first one. Since I am using it in the for loop, automatically it is giving me the reference get column count, because the left hand side variable is the I variable, which is an integer. I hope you are understanding. The left hand side variable here you can see I, which is an integer. That's the reason, since I am using it with the relational operator, it understood that I am supposed to use this particular thing. So get column count, and then obviously you know what you need to do here. And now let's display few informations. So result set metadata. So let's display. Here you can see get column name. So you can just use this get column name, and here give this particular I, because that's the variable which we are using for navigating through all the columns. Again, what we will do now, rsmd dot. Now we will display the type. We will display the type, that particular type, and similarly, just see one more. Type name. So let's explore these things quickly. So I'm just displaying the column name and then the column type and column type name. So don't bother about up to this, because that's only every time I run a record is getting inserted with one and Krishna, and the same thing's getting displayed. And here you can see ID, that is the first iteration. Column name is ID, and column type is 2. So each and every type you have seen earlier when I have shown in that PDF material, in whatever order it is being shown there. Accordingly, it will be showing each and every particular type has some integer value. So that's what it is showing. So number type is of 2, and number name, I mean type name is number. Similarly, second column is name, and type value is 12, and the type name is varchar2. Something like this, you can get the result set metadata information, and even you can see so many other informations. Here you can see various things like here you can see get URL. These are the various methods which you can use with the database metadata object also. Even though we have seen some all procedures, something like that, but still you can examine so many other things. I'll just show with this and move on to sequence, because that is very important. So here you can see when I am asking with the database metadata object get me the URL, it has given me the URL. Similarly, you can also ask the database metadata object to get me the columns, get me the keywords, something like that. You can just ask it different ways. You can just try all that methods. Here as I have given get URL, similarly you can also use some other methods and explore. You can just ask it get driver name, so you can just see all those things. Similarly, I'll just try with get keywords. This is one method which you can see all the keywords. Okay, not just keywords. Here you can see the quick fix it is giving me get SQL keywords, so that it will be returning you all the SQL keywords. So here you can see it have just displayed me the keywords. You can just move it and see, but just understand that database metadata object, you will be able to find all the information with related to the database, and result set metadata object you will be using in order to get the information with respect to the results, so that's the basic difference between the database metadata object and the result set metadata object. So result set metadata will only give you data about the results, whereas database metadata will give you information related to the database. So these are the points you need to remember. And now very quickly I'll just show you how to create sequence. So let me use my SQL plus, and I hope the screen is visible now, and I'm using my Scott account. And now whatever the student table is there, what I'm trying to do is I'm going to create a sequence. How I'm going to create sequence, just observe. The syntax is create sequence, sequence name, and then just hold on, my laptop charging is about to finish. Let me just connect the adapter, 1 second. Yeah, I'm back. So create sequence, sequence name, and then you have to use this keyword start with. So you have to specify the initial value. What should be the initial value your sequence should run with? So I'm just using my start value is 2, because already I have used 1 so many times. Next keyword you have to use is increment by. So you are saying that your sequence, you are creating a sequence with the name sequence 1. That's fine. You are saying that you are you are creating a sequence with the name sequence 1, and you want this particular sequence 1 to start with the value 2 onwards, and next value should be incremented by what value, that also you should specify with this increment by. I am just giving increment by 1. And then what should be the minimum value? Next you have to specify the minimum value. Let me give minimum value also 2. Since I am starting with 2, I am just saying minimum value to be 2. And next, what should be the maximum value? Let me give 100. That means it should not exceed 100. That's what I am just saying. You can give any value. And then the next value you should give cycle or no cycle. You can give cycle or no cycle. So what does it means, so you are saying that you are creating a sequence with the name sequence 1, which is starting from 2 onwards, and you are saying each time it should be incremented by 1, and the first value, the minimum value should be 2, and the maximum value should be 100. That means after you inserted 100th record, then the next value, where do you want it to start? So when I am using cycle, the next value again it starts with 2 onwards. That's what the point need to be understood. If I give no cycle, then after 100 it will be giving you error. After 100 it will give you error, because you are saying that no cycle, so it's not going to be repeated. So here you can see the message sequence created. Now this particular sequence 1, I can use it with any of the tables. I can use it with any of the tables. I just require to know this particular name sequence 1. Now, okay, what I'll be doing is I'll just use this and create a record, so that you will be understanding. So insert into student, which is the table which we created, values, and then here first I have to specify the this particular value. So instead of giving the value of id, what I'll be using is I'll use my sequence which we just created. Observe carefully what I am doing. So I am just giving insert into student values sequence 1 dot next val, and for name I am just giving some Kumar. Okay, so sorry, single quotes I am supposed to use. I have used double quotes because with our Java we'll be using double quotes now. So I just used it. So now you can see instead of giving value, we have just used that particular sequence. Now if you just display it, so you can see this particular got inserted. So this is how you will be creating sequence. So once again, just observe how we have created the sequence. So create sequence, that's the keyword, create sequence, and then the sequence name, and then you have to specify your sequence should start with which value, and next you have to specify it should be incrementing by which value. Next you have to specify what is the minimum value for your sequence. Next you should specify what should be the maximum value for your sequence. Next you should specify do you want this particular thing to be cycled or not cycled. If you specify cycle, when it reaches the maximum value, the next value automatically it will come to the start value, and this particular sequence you can just use it in the tables wherever you wanted. So this is how you will be creating sequence. And how do you use the sequence is by using this sequence name dot next val. By using this sequence name dot next val, you are automatically it will give you the sequence next value. I hope everyone understood. So similarly, you can insert any number of records. So here you can see next value, and now I am saying here lava. One row created. Again, if you just run it and see, automatically you can see that. So this is how you will be generating the sequence. And why I have set this sequence is now I will get back to the project. So here you can see my CPC project, and as I have said, I got a flight reservation project. So in this, let me close all these things, otherwise. So here you can see, and one more thing, guys, you just need to remember this. Anyway, before your final assessment, I will be conducting one more session. I mean, very final assessment. I'm not saying with regard to second assessment. So this is the point you need to remember. So when you are going to create the connection also, just observe how you are to give. So JDBC colon Oracle colon, this is the same, but your username and passwords, this is how you should be using. This anyway, once again I'll discuss at the time. So B stands for batch, 2020 stands for year, 01 stands for batch, and this last remaining digits is your ID. I mean, for PBL app, you are using your user ID, na, that particular ID. This should be your username and password. Just remember this point for the final assessment point. I'm just saying, since I have opened this file anyway, I'm just showing, and this particular B is common for everyone. 2020 is the year. Anyway, you are also going to take your assessment this year only, so it will be 2020, and 01 is the batch number. So in this particular year, yours is the first batch only, so you also will be using 01 only. Again, by this year end, there will be one more batch. I mean, for your juniors, they will be undergoing the same training. For them, it will be 02, and the remaining digits which is not highlighted, that is your user ID to the PBL app. So this is how you will be concatenating and using for username and passwords. And next thing is okay, it's not there in this DB util. Let me check it in service. I think it is in DAO, data access object. Yeah, here you can see. So this is how you will be using in the projects. Whatever might be your project, your project might be student reservation system, flight reservation system, bus reservation system, or train reservation system, or it can be any project. But every project, whoever will be getting, just remember this point, that they will be getting the project documentation. They are going to mention the sequence name. For my project, the name what they gave is sequence name like this. So I require to fetch the next value by using the sequence name what they have mentioned in the project documentation, and then I need to use that in order to insert into the table. Here you can see select sequence name dot next val from that particular, and this is common thing you will be using dual. In order to insert, you will directly use sequence name dot next val, but if you want to fetch the value, this is the common thing you will be using from dual. Just remember that. If you want to insert, directly you will use sequence name dot next val, but when you want to fetch the value, this is the common thing. Select sequence name dot next val from dual. So my sequence name what they have mentioned in the documentation is this one. So I have used this, and whatever this you are going to retrieve, this particular value you have to use it while inserting. This value you have to use it while inserting into the record. I hope everyone understood what I said. So creating sequence everyone should know, and for some of the projects what they will be asking is they will mention the name but they say that they haven't created. So as I have shown you just now how to create a sequence, you have to create the sequence with the name given by them in the project documentation, and then you need to fetch the value as I have just shown you. Select sequence name dot next val from dual. By using that statement, you are going to fetch the sequence value, and that value you are going to use it for inserting into the record. Just like how I have shown you, insert into table values in the brackets, we are using that particular thing now. Like that you have to use. Most of the projects, they are going to create the sequence in the database directly, and they will just ask you to use that particular sequence name. For some of the projects, they will say you to create a sequence with the given name and then use that particular sequence next value for inserting into the records. I mean inserting into the table. So this is what you just require, and with this I'll put full stop to this particular RDBMS SQL JDBC concepts, because prepared statement also I have discussed already, as I have created that particular application, and I said why we require to use prepared statement as per industry standards than compared to statement. Because of its improved performance, we will be using prepared statement, and execute query we will be using along with select statements. Execute update we will use it along with other DDL statements, and metadata I have shown you with regard to both database metadata, how you get information about the database, and also I have shown you result set metadata, how do you get information about the results. And this, as I mentioned, I am skipping it using callable statement and transactions. It's with procedures, because I'm not going to discuss any of the DBMS procedures and you don't require them. So I'm just keeping that. So with this, I'm keeping full stop to this RDBMS SQL JDBC concepts. And in next class, I will be starting ant tool, and I'll show you in Eclipse how to create this ant that we will see in next session. And since I'm keeping full stop to this RDBMS SQL JDBC, you should be ready for the second assessment now. You should be ready for the second assessment now. Before the date of the assessment 2, once again I'll just give you a recap session, don't worry. But as of today, any queries you have, you can just post it in the comment section, and if everything you understood, you can just post your roll numbers for attendance. Any queries, you can just post it in the comment section, else you can give your roll numbers for attendance. I'll be waiting for a couple of minutes. Okay. I don't see any queries being posted. Then I hope everyone understood today's session, as well as everyone understood this RDBMS SQL JDBC completely. If not, you can refer to the last 2 days training sessions also. So with this, we will conclude and meet for tomorrow's AND session. Okay then. Thank you and bye.